Good morning, ALF listeners, and welcome to a repost of episode 117 of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. And why are we jumping back to episode 117 today? Well, this was an absolutely brilliant episode where Southeast Queensland angler Peter Herbst took us through how to target mulloway, jewfish, in the Brisbane River system. Now, this is a year-round opportunity that's right on the doorstep of Brisbaneites. And the Brisbane Jewfish opportunity, I guess, is probably a bit better known now than what it was back 4 or 5 years ago when we recorded this podcast. But nonetheless, there's a lot of Brisbane locals that aren't aware of it, which is a real shame because if you're being frustrated by strong winds, not able to get out on the bay or outside because the winds have just been too strong, well, this is an opportunity that you can take advantage of day and night, 24/7, 365, regardless of the weather conditions. So hopefully this repost will inspire a few more people to go out. Now, if you are planning on targeting Brisbane River Jewfish and you're looking for the perfect rod to do that, well, I've got some great news for you because right now I can help ALF listeners get their hands on the amazing Jabba's Wanderlust fishing rod, which is a brilliant rod for this style of fishing because it allows you to cast lures of the sizes that you'd normally throw at jewfish and the weights that you'd normally throw at jewfish, but it also doubles as a jigging rod. You can add a butt extension to it to make it perfect for jigging, and that allows you to drop slow pitch jigs and vibes down on the jewfish. So you can cast or you can jig with the same rod, and you've got every base covered on the Brisbane River. Now, this is also a travel rod. It's a 5-piece rod, or 6 pieces, I guess, if you include the butt extension, which is a real bonus. If you ever travel to go fishing, it packs down to about 50 centimetres long in a semi-hard case that you can put in your suitcase. Really, really easy to transport. So absolutely brilliant for that. But even if you're not traveling all over the country fishing, this rod will absolutely slay the jewfish, be light in your hands, and an absolute pleasure to use. And depending on your preferences, it's available in both bait cast and spin varieties as well. Now, as an ALF listener, you've got the opportunity to grab one of these Wanderlust rods, and to help you get the most out of it, I'll actually throw in a Team Doc Lures membership worth $100 and a couple of packs of awesome Pro Lure clone prawns as well. So that'll help you to catch some jewfish in the Brisbane River, but you could use this gear anywhere. Barra, threadfin, snapper, kingfish, reef flats, anywhere you want a rod that you can go from casting to jigging and back again really easily and have plenty of grunt to handle big fish. The Jabba's Wanderlust is your ticket. Now, to get one of these for yourself, jump over to doclures.com/wander. That's WANDER, doclures.com/wander, and that will allow you to take advantage of the deal that we've got going at the moment with Jabba's Australia. Anyway, enough of that, folks. Let's go and listen to episode 117, Fishing the Brisbane River for Jewfish with Peter Herbst.
This is the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, where we share the secrets of Australia's lure fishing gurus every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And now here's your host, Greg Vinyl from doclures.com.
G'day folks, episode 117 of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. I'm Greg, Doc Lures Vinyl, and my job is to bring you Australia's best and brightest lure fishers 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, and have them share some tips for catching fish on lures so that you and I can do the same thing as they do. Today I'm speaking to Southeast Queensland resident and jewfish angler Peter Herbst. Now, Peter knows the Brisbane River Jewfish population on a first-name basis, and he is going to tell us how we can get to know them pretty well too, by going through the tackle, the techniques, and the lures that he uses to get his success on that particular river system. Now, folks, as always, there are show notes for this episode. There are also opportunities to leave comments on the website at doclures.com, so please do so. I'd love to hear from you. But for now, let's get Peter to the microphone and get things started. Peter, how you going, mate?
Great, thanks, Greg.
Now, we are going to talk about Brisbane Jewfish, Brisbane River Jewfish, perhaps even a little bit of Moreton Bay. And, I've been watching the Facebook feeds for a little while, and you keep coming up over and over again with pictures of Jewies, mate. So got a pretty good idea that you might know what you're doing in that area, and looking forward to some great tips.
Yeah, love talking about Jewies and love catching Jewies. So, yeah, happy to talk to you.
Yeah, they're an awesome fish, and I know a lot of our listeners like to chase the old Jewies as well. So, mate, before we get stuck into talking about Jewfish, though, we'd just like to spend a few minutes getting to know you a little bit better for those of our listeners who don't know who Peter is. So let's start with a few just getting to know you, ice-breaking type questions, mate. We're going to talk about Jewies today, but you chase plenty of other species on lures as well. So what are your favourite species for throwing lures at?
There's probably 3 that I really enjoy catching. Giant herring, golden trevally, and threadfin salmon. They're probably three that I love targeting beyond jewfish.
Awesome, mate. And where do you do your giant herring fishing? Because I tell you, that's something that I like to do as well. And I haven't caught a lot of them, but they're an absolute hoot. So where do you do that?
The Hervey Bay area for those, and I do catch them in Moreton Bay as well. A little bit more specific time period for them, but the bigger ones are up in Hervey Bay, so your metre to metre 20 fish, which are sensational.
Yeah, that's where I've caught mine as well, just coincidentally. So very, very good. All right, mate. Now, you're a busy guy, but if you could take a week off, just you and a fishing rod, you could leave your mobile phone at home, leave your laptop computer at home, nobody could bother you, and you could go off anywhere in Australia for a fish. Where would you spend the week and why?
I think I'd love to do a liveaboard charter up in sort of Weipa or that northern part of Australia, just because of the diversity of species you can get in a day's fishing. You can go on the flats and catch all sorts of trevally and go up the creek and catch barramundi and stuff like that. So, yeah, a liveaboard charter with a diversity of fishing all in a day's period. I'd love to do that one day. It'd be great.
And, mate, you've caught a lot of different species in your time, but is there one that managed to avoid you? A bucket list species you'd like to share with us?
Nothing locally, but up north, I think sort of a permit or one of those big tusk fish that they catch on the flats, sight casting. That would be excellent to do that one day.
Yeah, well, you might do that while you're in Weipa as well, mate.
That's the plan, I think.
Opportunities there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, mate, do you have something that we might find in your tackle box or on your boat that might come as a bit of a surprise to us?
I think in general, fishing tackle, there's nothing too out of the ordinary there. But for targeting dewies that some people are quite surprised that I have is a slow jigging outfit. So using big metal lures for jewfish, which is a little unusual.
Got a slight feeling that may actually come up again in conversation a little bit later on in this episode. I certainly hope it will.
Yep, it certainly will.
What's your favourite piece of fishing technology or your favourite fishing gadget?
I think this is a popular one, but number one, the sounder, and number two, the electric motor. I think that what we can do with those things now is just fantastic and helps our fishing endless, especially a fish like jewfish. It's such an important tool.
So, mate, tell us a bit about your boat and the sounder and the electric motor that you've got on it.
Okay, so I run a Australian-made bass boat, and I've got a Simrad Evo 2 at the console, and off the electric I run just a Sonar Elite 7, which gives me a sort of a view directly down below the boat, and at the back I've got the side scan so I can look, either to the left or the right and, find where the jewfish are and target them with the boat, and then move the electric to the fish and fish on top of them.
Sounds pretty ideal, mate, for the style of fishing that we're talking about this episode. No doubt about it. Now, Peter, if you could head off for a fish with anybody in the world, somebody who's alive, somebody who's passed away, but somebody who you look up to and respect as a fisherman, who would you go out fishing with for the day?
I think to learn something about fishing, a guy called Johnny Mitchell, who's up in Gladstone, he's someone that just sort of blows me away with his understanding of fish and the environment and how it affects the fish and where they're going to be. So on a learning basis, probably Johnny Mitchell. And then just as on a personal thing, I love going out with the kids fishing.
All right, mate. Last of these getting to know you questions. And I'm going to deviate from the script that I gave you. But, mate, tell us about your favourite jewfish memory from the Brisbane River. And you've caught a lot of fish there, but is there one that really stands out in your mind?
There's one particular day where me and a mate went down, and I think it was sort of the awakening of what's sort of happening down there. And we went along and had a look in the usual sort of areas, and all of a sudden we found a school of epic proportions, and I think within a 2 to 3 hour period we would have landed at least 20 dew, ranging from 90 centimetres to 1.10 metre, and that was a session, hasn't been repeated, and it'll be etched in the memories forever, I think.
How long ago was that, mate?
That's probably going back to 2 to 3 years, I think now. Yeah, 3 years, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, so not too long ago, yeah. Wow.
No, not that long. I still remember quite well.
Excellent stuff. Well, you set the scene nicely for today's episode. So, mate, Brisbane River Jewfish, you've been fishing for them for a long time. You've got them a bit wide. You can do better than the average angler. So tell us something that you've learned about targeting that particular species in the Brisbane area that perhaps most anglers wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think just the fact that jewfish are a year-round option. They can bite any time of day, any stage of the tide. Locating the fish and drifting lures through them accurately is such an important thing that I think a lot of people miss.
So, Peter, what's a mistake you reckon that a lot of beginners to jewfishing might make when they're targeting them in the Brisbane area?
I think just relying on conceptions about where the fish are going to be, whether it's a deep hole. At the front of the Brisbane River, there's a heap of pylons and wharfs. And I think they think the fish are going to be like right next to the pylons or in a certain area, and they're limiting the area they're going to fish or the area they're going to look for the fish.
So coming with a preconceived idea and then not deviating from that initial plan, I guess, is the mistake by the sounds of it that
Definitely.
People make. Let's imagine that I turn up at the Brisbane River, never been there before. I'm keen to get a Dewey. You've already said fish are going to be where they're going to be. They may not be where you'd expect them to be. So tell us how you go about locating the fish on any particular day.
Very heavily relying on the sounder, I think, Greg, is the key. I have some areas that I like to fish, but you really got to find where they are and just rely on that sounder, driving around till you locate the fish. If you can find a large school, that's great. But even just smaller individuals or twos or threes, and then targeting that area that they're going to be.
Let's get a really clear picture of what you do here, mate. So you launch the boat. Do you start sort of at the mouth of the river? Do you start further up the river? How far up the Brisbane River do the Jewfish sort of move, or where do you concentrate your fishing effort?
In the time period that I'm fishing, it's from the very mouth of the Brisbane River, probably up, say, 10 kilometres up the river. But most of the action's realistically from what's called the boat passage entry through to the end of the river. So both sides of the river, you've got the oil side and you've got the dock side. Those sides basically from there to the mouth of the river is the key areas to look.
Okay, so mostly downstream of Brisbane City.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Peter, if we were to try and narrow down, let's imagine that we've only got a very limited opportunity. We can go any particular time, but we've got to isolate that one period when we're most likely to catch one. Tell us what that period would look like in terms of weather conditions, in tidal movement, in terms of lunar cycles and all that kind of stuff.
I have a big preference for a 8 to 9 o'clock low tide on a neap tide, and you think neap tide means less current, but in certain areas of the Brisbane River, the current diverts from different areas. So along the dock sides, for example, there's actually more current through there on a small tide than there was a big tide. On the big tide, the current diverts across the other side of the river. So that has more flow on those smaller tides. And mid-November, when there's a heap of the jellyfish on the surface, is a prime time to go as well.
So the fish aren't feeding on the jellyfish, though?
Don't know what it is about those jellyfish, but when they're there, there's often plenty of big Jew there as well. So I couldn't tell you what that is, but it just is.
Talk about the weather conditions, mate. Do you watch the barometer much? Do you prefer a still day? Do you like a bit of wind? Do you like it overcast? Do you like it clear? What works best for you?
A low wind would be preferable, but a light southeasterly or a light northeasterly would be fine. Not a huge fan of a westerly wind for that area, but anything light from the east is pretty good.
All right, so let's imagine I turn up at your place, mate. I've got the fishing gear in my hand. I say, Peter, let's go out and nail a couple of Deweys. Give us a bit of an idea of how the day would unfold from the time we get to the boat ramp till we left the water.
Okay, I want to get on the water fairly early, just on light, and we'd shoot down towards the front. We'd do some laps along the docks, keeping our distance. There is a legal limit you're allowed between you and the docks. You have to be 30 metres out. So setting your side scan to say 40 metres allows you to be beyond that limit, and you can still see if the fish are up against the docks. But a lot of time they're actually quite a ways out from the dock. So you might have to do some sort of zigzagging, drive along the docks, turn, go out, say, 50, 60 metres, do another circuit along that same line until you're locating, hopefully, a larger school. And if not, just a few isolated fish that you can still target.
All right, Peter, so before we hit the record button on this episode, you and I had a bit of a chat, and you mentioned that Deweys can be caught in the Brisbane River all year round, but that period from late spring through early summer, particularly around November, that's when it's sort of prime time to get a couple of good Deweys. So what is it that the fish are actually feeding on during those months of the year?
Could be an aggregation of some sort of spawning as well, I think, but they certainly eat a very diverse diet of shrimps and crabs and prawns and fish. But it could be just that breeding or something like that. I'm not too sure, but they sort of congregate at that period, especially if there's going to be a flood that season where they can sort of tell that rain's coming and they'll congregate there before a flood as well.
And do they continue to bite, mate, after that rain's happened? Is it something that, sort of stirs them up a little bit, or does it shut them down?
If you can find the right conditions, water clarity, where the baits move to, it is certainly possible. They can move out of the river and head down towards the bay further. But yes, you certainly can. It's just a matter of finding them. They can push them and be a bit sparse and a bit hard to find, but they certainly know when that rain's coming and they congregate in that mouth area before rain for sure.
Yeah, so no doubt they're waiting for stuff to be flushed down, bait fish and prawns and whatever else gets carried down by the rain, or perhaps they're
So
going
that's
to
the case. Mm.
Yeah, then maybe they're going to move out of the area. You know, it's a really common thing in many areas, as you probably know, that when you get a bit of a flush, that's when the dewies come on the chew, and particularly down around the seawalls and that sort of thing. So there are no seawalls at the mouth of the Brisbane River, of course. It goes straight out into Moreton Bay, so the fish obviously then move into the bay. But let's talk about tackle. Now, if I was to turn up at your place once again and say, mate, let's go out for a fish, I want to get a jewfish, what rods, reels, lines and leaders should I have in my hand, mate?
I've got a preference for using overhead/bait cast sort of setups myself. Line class, I mean, there's some big fish there. We do have an issue with sharks at times as well. So we like to fish on the heavier side, P2 to P3, say 20, 30, 40 pound line with a leader size, probably down to about 16 up to 40 pound, but more so on that sort of 30, 40 pound size mostly. I don't believe they're an overly leader shy species, so you can go a bit higher. And like I said before, the sharks are there, so you don't want to lose too many fish, so you may as well fish a little bit heavier and get them a bit quicker.
What length of leader do you like to fish, mate, and how do you attach it to your braid?
Up to a rod length is good, and definitely an FG knot. I mean, a lot of the rods now are coming with smaller and smaller guides, which reduces the weight in the rod and makes it a nicer rod to use. But with that knot, we can use sort of any guides and have no issues at all. It's a fantastic knot, that FG knot.
Yeah, it's certainly revolutionised the connection from the leader to the line and made a big difference, as you say, where rod guides are a little bit smaller and you want to be able to use a fairly heavy leader still. The old FG knot makes a big difference. All right, Peter, look, we've covered tackle, we've covered time of year, we've covered tides, we've covered conditions. We've talked a little bit about what the dewies might be eating. So let's start to move on now to lures. And what I'm going to get you to do, and it's going to be tricky for you, mate, because I know you're a bit of a tackle rat, but what I'm going to get you to do is try and narrow it down to the 3 top lure choices that you'd be pretty comfortable would catch you a jewfish in the Brisbane River. And while you're having a think about what you might suggest, I'm going to go off and thank our sponsors. Folks, we're on the Brisbane River. We are targeting the mighty jewfish, and we have with us Peter Herbst. And Peter, he knows his jewfish pretty well. He's given us a pretty good rundown, except, of course, we need to know what lures to use, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So, Peter, mate, hit us with your first lure choice for Brisbane River dewies.
Okay, I'm a little bit methodical with my lure choices, so I'll start with my most aggressive, I guess you call, technique, and that's the slow jigging. The reason I use that first is I like to see how aggressive the fish are and then work my way back to a more subtle presentation. The more aggressive presentation obviously gets me to the fish a lot quicker too. So in that sort of 15 metres of water with some high current, using a heavy jig like my favourite, which is the Palms Slow Blat in a 60-gram model, it gets to the bottom quite quickly. So it fights those factors of tide and current and just gets us to the fish a lot quicker. With that current and depth water issue, I'd like to try and get the boat as close to the fish as I can. So I usually try and get a little bit up current of the fish, and then I'll deploy the lure down to the bottom. And a lot of people think jigging's a lot of fast moving and winding and that sort of stuff, but these are demersal fish and they live on the bottom, so we need to keep that lure in that zone where the fish are going to be. So we really only bring that lure up, say, a metre, 2 metres, and then back down the bottom again. So it's a progressive jig up and then fall down. It's on that fall when those fish are going to grab that lure.
Yeah, and the name of the lure says it all, Slow Blat. You're going to fish it slow. So, mate, with the jig, are they aggressive lifts of the rod to get it up to a metre or 2 off the bottom? Do you do very gentle lifts and then let it flutter down? Do you maintain, a semi-taut line on the drop, or do you let it drop on a free line?
I use an overhead reel so that I can keep in contact with the line as it comes off the reel. A spin reel, if I was to use that, you'd lift the bail arm and you've got the flicking of the line coming off. And with a heavy lure like that, those flicks are pretty severe and you won't feel a bite as good as the rolling off an overhead reel. So I use an overhead reel. It's really just a rotation of the handle and a slight lift of the rod, and then a pause, and then again your slight rotation, a full rotation of the handle and a slight lift of the rod, and that'll bounce the rod, and the jig will bounce with the rod. So they're sort of designed to make that lure bounce up, pause, bounce up, pause, bounce up, and that sort of get their attention. And then on that slow fall, as that lure's, rotating from side to side, that's when the fish will come and grab it.
All right, mate. And what are you doing with the boat while all this is happening? Are you spot locked in one place, or are you drifting along with the current and casting out at right angles to the current and working the lure back towards the boat?
With all these presentations, I think it's important to try and match your drift speed with your current speed. So you're drifting the lure along with the boat. So with the jig, it's because it's faster, it's probably less important. You can probably spot lock a little bit. but I like to drift my lures. So yeah, definitely drifting, hopefully through the school. I said get in front of them and then drift back through them and show those lead fish in a school. If you've ever seen them in a school, they'll all be looking in the same direction, and ones at the front I think are more likely to eat that lure. So you want to land it before the school and then bounce it through them.
Yeah, because you think about it, if you're a jewfish in amongst a school of other jewfish and you're hungry, where are you going to position yourself? You're going to go right to the front to try and get whatever comes down first in line. It's a bit like the sushi train, you don't want to be right at the back. Just reading between the lines, mate, you're motoring upstream, you're finding the fish, you're motoring up current, you're floating back down, drifting the lure at the same pace as the boat, working it back towards you. Then once you've gone past the fish, you fire up the motor, you go to the other side of the river, back up and start again. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. You need to be on them. So we position the boat so we're going to have a drop. The lure's going to go down. We'll get a few movements of that lure through the school. We either get the fish or you don't. And then you need to reposition and start again. So go through with the lure, try a different lure, come back and keep going until you get the result.
Now, the fish are taking the lure on the drop. What does a bite look like? Is it subtle? Is it savage? What do you need to look at? What do you need to set the hooks? Do they set themselves?
It's savage, and I think that's why I use it first, and I like it so much. It's quite savage. It's quite a hard strike, and you got to get into dew because they have a tendency to spit that lure back out. So, yeah, straight into it, quite hard, get those hooks in.
And hooks on the slow blat, mate, do you use them straight at the packet, or do you like to tweak your hooks up?
I keep some standard, but I will also upgrade them to a JST 44, I think it is, in a Van Fuke, which is like a 2.0 or 3.0. And then another little trick I put on them is I put these little squid skirts on the actual assist hooks, and they're called Yamashita Panic Bait. That accentuates the lure's action, and I think it's a focal point too for the Jew to actually attack those assist hooks and then increase your hookup ratio. Rather than biting the lure, they're actually biting your hooks, so it increases your hookup rate.
Oh, there's a great tip right there, folks. Note that one down for future reference. All right, mate, let's move on to your second lure choice. So you've gone with the slow blat, the aggressive approach first. If they're not playing ball with the aggressive lure, what do you use next?
Okay, soft vibe's the next option, and we've got, again, a bit of weight there, 23 grams or around that about, and they cut through the water quite well. So another lure that's going to get to the fish fairly quickly. And then we've obviously got that vibration. As we lift that lure, the vibration pulses out. So it's, again, a fairly aggressive presentation, but not as aggressive as the jig. So if that mood suits them, then that's the better option. And we basically sort of similar technique, but I might just give it 2 or 3 little sharp hops, then float back down again. And that's pretty much always going to be on that drop that those fish are going to eat it. I do a little bit of hook upgrade if necessary. The Xeric fish traps, they come with pretty good hooks, so you don't have to do too much with them. The other good brand is the FLT Trans Amps, but they require a bit of a hook upgrade on them.
All right, mate, good stuff. And your third lure choice, assuming that they're not taking the vibes either, what do you move to next?
Move to a soft plastic, which is most subtle presentation. You can vary up how you lift that lure. I'll start with a heavier one first, probably 1/2 ounce to a 3/4 ounce jig head, and then work my way back. So the more free time in the air and more subtle it is in the presentation. One I've been using just recently is the Live Target Fleeing Shrimp, and it's an excellent replica of a shrimp that we've got here at the Cherubim. And that seems to be a really, really good technique and a good lure. And it's really quite slow. You sort of drag along the bottom and just give it 1 or 2 quick little flicks like it's a prawn or a shrimp flicking off the bottom. And that's been working really, really well just recently.
Awesome, Peter. That covers our 3 lure choices. And now we've got all the information we need to go out and catch juries. So, mate, we're going to take this episode home, and what we'll do to start with is talk a little bit about the company that you work for, which of course is EJ Todd's, and what EJs do for the fishing industry. And then we'll have a quick chat about maybe a tip you can give us for when the fishing's a bit slow and you can see fish on your sounder, but you just can't get them to bite. Maybe there's some tips there for breaking that sort of donut day. But let's start first, mate, by talking about EJ Todd. Give us a bit of a rundown on what you guys do and what your brands are.
Okay, we're a small family-owned wholesale company that sells fishing tackle to mostly your independent retailers. And we do quite a few brands, actually. We've got the Palm Slow Blat, for example, is one of our brands. We've also got the Live Targets, Lunker Hunt, TMCO, Lucky Craft, Sunline, quite a long list of really cool brands.
Yeah, some big names in there, and names that, folks, if you go back through past episodes of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, you'll hear come up over and over again. So good stuff. Great that you guys are there bringing those bits and pieces in. I'm going to have a chat to you afterwards about some of that stuff too, mate. But let's finish this episode off, mate, with just a tip for those days when you found the fish, you can see them on the sounder, You've tried the 3 lures, you've tried the techniques that you've suggested, but for whatever reason, you're not getting a fish. Give us a couple of tips, mate, for hooking fish on those really slow days.
I think slowing it down, like I said before, using the current to drift your lure is such a key thing. Having that lure matching your drift speed so it's the most natural presentation as possible. You can add some scent to your lures and drop your leader sizes down, drop your jig head weights down, and just try and lighten it up and create a more natural presentation if necessary.
Good stuff, mate. And it never hurts when you're having those quiet days to go a little bit lighter, just give a little bit more attention, a little bit more care to your presentation, slow things down, and hopefully you can get the fish moving and get one onto your line. So, Peter, it's been tremendous talking to you. We really enjoy the information that you shared with us. So for that, we thank you, and we'll see you out on the water sometime.
Cheers, Greg. Thanks, mate.
Don't miss a single episode of ALF. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes or jump on the doclures.com website for downloads and show notes. Till their next episode, Tidelines.